Hey guys, tonight we step into the grey, gritty world of a Soviet factory worker in the 1952nd, where the air smells of oil and sweat, and the clang of metal echoes like a heartbeat. Picture yourself trudging through a snowy dawn, your boots crunching on icy gravel, the red star on the factory gate looming ahead. The sky's barely awake, but you're already shivering, pulling your threadbare coat tighter. This isn't some cozy office gig you're about to clock in for a 12-hour shift, and honestly, you probably won't survive this without a strong cup of something. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're up before the sun, your breath fogging in the frigid air as you join a stream of workers shuffling toward the factory. It's 1953, and the Soviet Union's industrial machine is roaring, fueled by people like you. The factory, a hulking beast of concrete and steel, churns out tractors or tank parts. Nobody tells you the full picture. You just know it's vital for the motherland. Your apartment, a cramped communal flat shared with 2 other families, is already a fading memory as you approach the gate. The guard, bundled in a greatcoat, checks your papers with a scowl, his fingers stiff from the cold. You flash your work pass, a flimsy booklet that's your ticket to survival. Without it, you're nothing. No job, no rations, no place in this system. The factory's whistle screams, signaling the shift's start. You step inside, and the air hits you like a wall, thick with coal dust, machine oil, and the faint tang of sweat. Rows of workers, faces pale and drawn, move like ants toward their stations. You're one of them, just another cog in Stalin's grand plan. The Soviet Union's industrial output doubled in the early 1952nd, a mainstream fact that meant more work for you, not more glory. Your job? Bolting together parts on an assembly line, a task so repetitive it could lull you to sleep if the noise didn't keep you sharp. The machines never stop, and neither do you not if you want to eat tonight. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers swore by chewing raw garlic to stay awake during shifts. They'd pop cloves like candy, claiming it fought off colds and kept them alert. You try it today, popping a piece from your pocket. It burns your tongue, and your neighbor grimaces. Guess your breath's a weapon now. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies were survival tactics or just desperate superstition in a system that pushed people to their limits. You weave through the factory floor, dodging sparks from a welder's torch. The place is a maze of pipes, belts, and grinding gears. Your station's a rusted workbench, tools scattered like relics from a forgotten war. You glance at the clock. 11 hours to go. A co-worker, Ivan, nudges you, muttering about the foreman's latest quota hike. They want us to build a tractor in half the time, he grumbles. You nod, keeping your thoughts to yourself. Speaking out loud could land you in trouble, and trouble here means more than a write-up. You've heard stories of workers sent to labor camps for less. The propaganda posters plastered on every wall don't help. Glory to the Soviet worker, one screams in bold red letters, showing a chiseled hero wielding a wrench like a sword. You roll your eyes. Nobody here looks that heroic. Most are like you, tired, hungry, and just trying to get through the day. You adjust your cap, a flimsy thing that does nothing against the chill seeping through the drafty walls. The factory's supposed to be heated, but the radiators are more decorative than functional. You joke to yourself that they're just here to remind you what warmth feels like. Your hands, already calloused, grip a wrench as you start bolting parts. The metal's cold, biting your fingers, but you keep moving. Slow down, and you'll miss the quota. Miss the quota, and you'll lose your bread ration or worse, your job. You think of your family, waiting back in that cramped flat. Your kids' shoes are falling apart, and your wife's been queuing for potatoes since yesterday. This job, soul-crushing as it is, keeps you all afloat. You tighten another bolt, the motion automatic now, your mind drifting to the rhythm of the factory's pulse. A sudden clang snaps you back, a wrench dropped somewhere down the line. Heads turn, but nobody dares stop. The foreman's shadow looms somewhere nearby, and you're not about to catch his eye. You smirk, imagining him tripping over a pipe. Wouldn't that be a sight? But you shake it off, focusing on the task. The day's just begun, and you've got a long road ahead in this concrete jungle. You're still on the factory floor, the rhythmic clang of machinery settling into your bones like a second heartbeat. The air's thick with the smell of grease and something faintly burnt, and your hands are already smudged with oil from the morning's work. You've just bolted another part onto the endless stream of tractor components, or maybe they're for tanks. Nobody tells you, and asking questions isn't exactly encouraged. Now, you're wading into the real grind of your day, the bureaucratic maze that keeps this Soviet factory humming. Every move you make is tangled in paperwork, quotas, and the ever-present shadow of the party's watchful eye. You shuffle toward a cramped office tucked behind a stack of crates, clutching a stack of forms that need signing before you can even touch the next batch of parts. The room's barely big enough for the desk, a flickering lamp, and a clerk who looks like he hasn't smiled since Lenin was alive. His desk is buried under papers, production reports, attendance logs, and those dreaded quota sheets. You hand over your work pass, and he stamps it without looking up, muttering about the 5-year plan. You nod, keeping your face blank. The Soviet Union's 5-year plans, rolled out since the 1922nd, set insane production goals mainstream history, says they turned the USSR into an industrial powerhouse, but for you, they're just a daily headache. The clerk hands you a new form, a production commitment you're supposed to sign, promising to hit today's target of 200 bolts per hour. You glance at it, your stomach sinking. That's up from 180 yesterday, and your wrists are already screaming. You scribble your name, knowing refusal isn't an option. Back at your station, you notice a quirky detail. Some workers carve tiny initials into the bolts they finish, a secret rebellion against the faceless quotas. You spot one with a crude V scratched into it. Victor probably showing off. You chuckle under your breath, wondering if you should try it. It's risky, but it might make you feel human for a second. You're back at your workbench now, the form tucked into your pocket like a bad omen. The quota's not just a number, it's a chain. Miss it, and you're docked rations. Hit it, and they'll raise it tomorrow. You tighten another bolt, your fingers moving on autopilot. The guy next to you, Sergei, leans over, whispering, "They say the planners in Moscow don't even know what we make here." You smirk, classic Sergei, always stirring the pot. Historians still argue whether the central planners were clueless or just ruthless, setting impossible targets to squeeze every ounce of effort from workers like you. The factory's bureaucracy isn't just about forms. It's the meetings, the endless reports, the self-criticism sessions where you're supposed to confess to slacking off even if you didn't. You dread those, but they're coming later. For now, you focus on the stack of parts waiting at your station. Each one needs to be checked, bolted, and logged. You grab a clipboard, scribbling down serial numbers. The pencil's blunt, and you have to press hard to make a mark. You joke to yourself that the USSR could conquer the world if they'd just invent a decent pencil sharpener. The line supervisor, a wiry man with a permanent frown, passes by, clipboard in hand. He's checking everyone's progress, and you feel his eyes on you. You speed up, your hands a blur, but you fumble a bolt, and it clatters to the floor. You freeze, hoping he didn't notice. He doesn't stop, but you know he saw it. You curse under your breath, bending to pick it up. The floor's coated in grime, and your fingers come away sticky. You wipe them on your overalls, already a patchwork of stains, and get back to work. Every task is tracked, every minute accounted for. You glance at the clock, only an hour until the lunch whistle, but it feels like a lifetime. The bureaucracy doesn't just control your work, it controls your mind. You're always calculating how many bolts to hit the quota, how many minutes you can steal for a break without getting caught. You think of your family, waiting for the bread ration you'll bring home. It's not just about you, it's about them. You tighten another bolt, the wrench slipping slightly in your sweaty hand. Then there's the incentive system, a Soviet classic. Meet your quota, and you might get a bonus extra ration coupons or, if you're lucky, a day off. But the bonuses are rare, and the quotas keep climbing. You heard a rumor that last month, a guy in the next shop got a medal for exceeding his target by 150%. You roll your eyes, probably had to work 20-hour shifts and bribe the clerk. You'd rather keep your sanity, thanks. Still, you can't help but wonder if you could game the system, maybe fudge a number or two. Dangerous thought, but it's there. The paperwork never ends. By mid-morning, you're sent to fetch another form. This one for machine maintenance. The machine you're using, a clunking beast from the 1932nd, breaks down weekly, but the forms to fix it take longer than the repair itself. You trudge back to the office, passing a poster of a smiling worker holding a hammer. "Build the future," it proclaims. You mutter, "Build me a better wrench first." The clerk doesn't laugh when you hand over the form, he never does. You're just another number to him, and he's just another cog to you. You're back at your station, the factory's hum a constant drone in your ears, like a lullaby you can't escape. Your hands move mechanically, bolting parts as the conveyor belt churns out more work. The air's heavy with dust, and you cough, tasting metal on your tongue. It's mid-morning now, and the initial rush of the shift has settled into a grinding rhythm. You're surrounded by your co-workers, comrades they're called, though the word feels hollow when everyone's competing for the same scraps. Bonds form here, sure, but so do rivalries, fueled by the Soviet system's twisted incentives. You're about to learn just how tight and how tense those ties can be. You glance at Ivan, the guy on your left, his face smudged with grease as he wrestles with a stubborn bolt. He's been here longer than you, a wiry man with a quick laugh and a knack for dodging the foreman's wrath. "Keep up, comrade," he teases, noticing your pace slowing. You grin, tossing back. "Keep up? I'm carrying you." It's a small moment, but it matters. These little exchanges are what keep you sane. The Soviet workforce, especially in the 1952nd, relied heavily on collective effort. Factories like yours churned out millions of tons of steel and machinery, a mainstream feat that powered the USSR's global flex. But down here, on the floor, it's the human connections that make the days bearable. Still, it's not all friendly banter. The system pits you against each other too. The party dangles rewards extra rations, a better apartment, maybe a shiny badge for those who outshine the rest. You've seen it. Workers snitching on each other to curry favor, or hoarding tools to slow down the guy next to them. Take Maria across the line. She's quick, precise, and always hits her quota early. You admire her, but others don't. Yesterday, someone accidentally spilled oil on her workbench, slowing her down. She didn't say a word, just cleaned it up, but you saw the fury in her eyes. You wonder if she suspects Pyotr, the guy who's been gunning for her spot on the honor roll. You stay out of it. Drama's the last thing you need. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers knit tiny charms into their gloves, believing it brings luck or wards off accidents. You notice Ivan's got a small red thread woven into his cuff, barely visible. You don't ask, but you smirk, wondering if he's got a superstitious streak. Maybe you'll try it yourself, couldn't hurt, right? Your own gloves are fraying, barely holding together, but they're all you've got. You flex your fingers, feeling the ache from hours of gripping the wrench. Historians still argue whether these workplace rivalries were deliberate, a way for the party to keep workers divided and focused on quotas rather than rebellion. You feel it, though, the tension. Every time a supervisor posts the daily rankings, eyes dart, whispers spread. You're not at the bottom, but you're not Maria either. You keep your head down, bolting another part, but you can't help noticing the glances. Sergei, 2 stations over, is muttering about how he deserves a bonus more than some show-off. You pretend not to hear, but it stings. You like Sergei, he shared his bread with you last week when your ration was short. The factory's a strange mix of camaraderie and competition. You swap stories during breaks, laugh about the foreman's bad moustache, but you're always watching your back. The party loves its socialist emulation campaigns, urging you to outdo your comrades for the glory of the motherland. You roll your eyes at the posters, one showing a worker shaking hands with Stalin himself, as if Stalin ever set foot in a place like this. You joke to yourself that if he did, he'd probably trip over the same loose bolt you keep dodging. You pass a tool to Ivan, and he nods thanks. It's a small gesture, but it builds trust. You've got each other's backs, at least for now. Last month, when a machine jammed, you both covered for each other, claiming it was a faulty part, not human error. The foreman bought it, but you both know one slip could cost you. The system rewards loyalty to the state, not to each other, and that's the trap. You tighten another bolt, your arms burning. Ivan mutters about the new quota, how it's impossible to hit without cutting corners. You nod. But you're thinking about Maria's oil spill. Corners get cut, grudges get held. The whistle for a quick water break sounds, and you join the others at a rusty fountain. The water's lukewarm, metallic, but you gulp it down. Ivan's there, joking about how the fountain's probably older than the factory itself. You laugh, but your eyes flick to Maria, standing alone, wiping her hands. You wonder what she's thinking, if she's planning revenge or just survival. You're all in this together, but only to a point. The party's made sure of that. You're halfway through your shift now, the factory's relentless clang fading into a dull pulse in your skull. Your hands are sore, your back aches, and the morning's garlic is still lingering on your breath. Sorry, Ivan. The whistle for lunch finally shrieks, cutting through the din like a lifeline. You wipe your greasy hands on your overalls and join the slow shuffle toward the canteen. A cavernous room that smells of boiled cabbage and stale bread. It's not exactly a gourmet escape, but it's a chance to sit, eat, and swap whispers with your comrades. The canteen's where the factory's pulse slows, where you catch a glimpse of the people behind the quotas, though, even here, the gossip's as much a currency as the rubles in your pocket. You grab a dented metal tray and join the line, the floor sticky under your boots. The canteen's walls are plastered with more propaganda. Eat for strength, work for victory, but the food tells a different story. You're handed a bowl of watery kasha, a slice of black bread, and a cup of weak tea that's more leaf than flavor. This is standard fare in the 1952nd Soviet Union, where rationing still lingers from the war years, a mainstream fact that keeps your stomach grumbling. You eye the bread, wondering if it's worth saving for your kid back home. Probably. You tuck it into your pocket, just in case. You find a seat at a long wooden table, squeezed between Ivan and a quiet woman named Lena, who works the lathe. The table's scarred with years of knife marks, some carved into crude initials or, quirkily enough, tiny hammer and sickle doodles, workers leaving their mark. Literally. You nudge Ivan, pointing at one. Think they got a bonus for that? He snorts, nearly choking on his kasha. The mood's lighter here, but only just. The canteen's a place to breathe, but you're still under the factory's rules, and the foreman's spies, loyal comrades, are always listening. Conversation hums around you, low and cautious. Lena leans in, her voice barely above a whisper, sharing gossip about Pyotr, the guy who might have sabotaged Maria's workbench. Heard he's been cozying up to the clerk, she says, stirring her tea. You raise an eyebrow, keeping your mouth full of kasha to avoid commenting. Gossip's dangerous, but it's also the lifeblood of the canteen. You hear snippets, someone's hoarding machine oil, another's been late 3 days running. You file it away, knowing information can be as valuable as a good wrench. Historians still argue whether these whispered networks were a form of resistance or just survival. A way to carve out control in a system that owns your every move. You take a sip of tea, wincing at its bitterness. It's not coffee, that's for sure. Coffee's a luxury you haven't seen in years. You joke to yourself that the tea's probably brewed from yesterday's floor sweepings. Ivan's talking now, his voice low. about a rumor that the factory's switching to tank parts next month. Means more quotas, he grumbles. You nod, your mind drifting to the bread in your pocket. You're already calculating how to stretch it for your family. The canteen's a brief escape, but it's not freedom. You're still tethered to the factory's rhythm, the party's demands. Lena's quieter now, picking at her bread. You notice she's got that red thread in her glove. Like Ivan's, maybe it's a factory trend, this Lucky Charm business. You don't ask, but it makes you wonder about the little rituals people cling to. You've got your own. You always tap your wrench twice before starting a new part, a silly habit you picked up from your first day. Helps you focus, or so you tell yourself. You glance around, seeing other workers hunched over their trays, some laughing, some silent. It's a mix of camaraderie and caution, everyone knowing one wrong word could reach the wrong ears. The canteen's noise dips as the lunch whistle looms. You shovel down the last of your kasha, the grainy texture sticking to your throat. Ivan's still talking, now about a co-worker who got a bonus last week. Probably kissed the foreman's boots, he says, and you chuckle, imagining the scene. The foreman's not here, thank goodness, but his absence doesn't mean you're safe. You spot Maria at another table, eating alone, her face unreadable. You wonder if she's heard the gossip about Piotr. You hope she doesn't do anything rash. Retaliation's a quick way to trouble. The whistle blows, sharp and final. You stand, tray in hand, and join the slow march back to the floor. Your stomach's not full, but it's enough to keep you going. You pat the bread in your pocket, a small comfort. The canteen's chatter fades behind you, replaced by the factory's roar. You're back in the grind, but for a moment, you carry the warmth of Ivan's laugh, Lena's whisper, and the weight of unspoken secrets. You're back on the factory floor, the canteen's brief respite already fading like a dream. The air's thick with the familiar mix of oil, dust, and heat from the machines, and your boots stick slightly to the grimy concrete. You settle at your workbench, the wrench in your hand feeling heavier than it did before lunch. The afternoon stretches ahead, endless and unyielding. But it's not just the work that's grinding you down, it's the constant barrage of propaganda. Everywhere you look, the Soviet state's voice is screaming at you. Posters, loudspeakers, even the foreman's pep talks. It's all designed to keep you moving, believing, and most importantly, obedient. You glance up, catching sight of a massive poster above your station. A muscular worker, hammer raised, grins under a slogan, "For the motherland's glory." The colours are faded, the paper curling at the edges, but the message is inescapable. These posters are everywhere, plastered across the Soviet Union in the 1952nd to boost morale and production, a mainstream tactic that turned factories into propaganda machines. You roll your eyes, muttering to yourself, "Glory's great, but a new pair of boots would be better." Ivan, catching your words, stifles a laugh, pretending to cough into his sleeve. You both know better than to let the wrong ears hear. The loudspeaker crackles to life, blaring a speech about exceeding last month's quotas. It's the same voice as always, droning about socialist triumphs and the evils of the West. You tune it out, focusing on the bolt in your hand, but the words creep in anyway. They're talking about heroes of labor, workers who supposedly churn out double their quotas. You've never met one, and you're pretty sure they're as real as unicorns. Still, the party loves its myths. You smirk, imagining yourself as a hero with a cape made of oily rags. Not exactly Hollywood material. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would doodle tiny caricatures of party leaders in the margins of their logbooks, a risky act of defiance. You spot one in the corner of a clipboard Stalin with a comically oversized mustache. You don't know who drew it, but it gives you a quick grin before you cover it with your hand. No need to tempt fate. Historians still argue whether these small rebellions were genuine resistance or just a way to blow off steam without crossing the line into real trouble. You tighten another bolt, the wrench slipping slightly in your sweaty grip. The propaganda's not just on the walls, it's in the air, in the way the foreman paces, barking about the 5-year plan. He stops near your station, reading from a crumpled sheet about how your factory's output is vital to the socialist future. You nod, keeping your face neutral, but inside you're thinking about the kasha from lunch, still sitting heavy in your stomach. Vital? Sure, if vital means keeping the bosses in Moscow happy while you scrape by. The loudspeaker shifts to music now, some rousing Soviet anthem about unity and progress. It's supposed to inspire you, but it just makes your head throb. You glance at Lena, who's working silently at her lathe. She's got that red thread in her glove, and you wonder if it's her shield against all this noise. You tap your wrench twice, your little ritual, and keep going. The propaganda's relentless, but you've learned to let it wash over you like static. Still, it's exhausting, this constant push to be a perfect Soviet worker, a cog that never complains. You notice Maria across the line, her movements sharp and precise despite the day's grind. She ignores the posters, the speeches, everything. You admire her focus, but you wonder what it costs her. There's a rumor she once tore down a poster in a fit of rage, though nobody's sure if it's true. You hope it is. It's nice to think someone's got the guts. You'd never try it, though. You've got a family to think of, and a missing poster could mean a one-way ticket to a labor camp. The foreman's voice cuts through your thoughts, calling for a quick huddle. You groan inwardly but join the others, standing in a loose circle as he waves another propaganda pamphlet. Comrades! We must surpass our capitalist rivals, he declares, his moustache twitching. You nod along, but you're thinking about the bread in your pocket, the one you saved for your kid. That's your real fight, not some global showdown. You joke to yourself that if the capitalists have better bread, maybe they're onto something. The huddle breaks, and you're back to your bolts. The propaganda keeps coming, posters, speeches, songs, but you've got your own rhythm now, a quiet defiance in the way you keep moving, keep surviving. You glance at Ivan, who's humming the anthem off-key, just to mess with it. You smile, tightening another bolt, and carry on. You're deep in the belly of the factory now, the afternoon sun barely creeping through the grimy windows high above. The air's a heavy mix of machine oil and sparks, and your hands are slick with sweat as you grip your wrench. The conveyor belt churns relentlessly, spitting out parts that you bolt together with mechanical precision. It's not just the quotas driving you now. It's the machines themselves, these clunking, groaning beasts that dominate your day. They're the heart of the factory, but they're also a constant threat, ready to jam, break, or worse, take a finger if you're not careful. You're in the thick of the grind, and every move counts. The machine you're working on is a relic, a hulking press from the 1932nd that shakes the floor with every cycle. It's supposed to stamp out tractor parts or maybe tank components. Who knows, but it's as temperamental as a tired mule. You feed a metal sheet into its jaws, pulling the lever with a grunt. The press slams down, the sound rattling your teeth. Soviet factories in the 1952nd were churning out millions of tons of industrial goods, a mainstream fact that made the USSR a global player. But down here, it's just you versus this beast. One wrong move, and you're done for. You notice a quirky habit among the workers. Some tap their machines before starting, like they're coaxing a stubborn horse. Ivan's doing it now, giving his lathe a quick pat while muttering something under his breath. You raise an eyebrow, but you get it superstitions cheaper than a hospital visit. You stick to your own ritual, tapping your wrench twice, but you're not above giving the press a side-eye, half expecting it to bite. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about faith, or just a way to feel in control when the machines and the system held all the power. Your hands move fast, feeding another sheet into the press. It jams mid-cycle, the metal screeching like a wounded animal. You curse under your breath, glancing around to make sure the foreman's not nearby. You grab a crowbar, wedging it into the machine's guts to free the stuck part. Sweat beads on your forehead, and your heart's pounding not just from the effort, but from the risk. A jammed machine means a missed quota, and that's a mark against you. You think of Lena's red thread, wishing you had some luck right now. The crowbar slips, grazing your knuckle, and you wince, checking for blood. Just a scrape, Thank goodness. Ivan notices, leaning over. Careful, comrade, he says, half joking. That thing eats fingers for lunch. You smirk, but your stomach twists. You've heard stories, workers losing hands, even lives, to these machines. Safety regulations exist, but they're more suggestion than law. You wipe your hand on your overalls, leaving a streak of blood and grease, and get back to work. The press groans back to life, and you exhale, but you're not relaxed. You're never relaxed here. The noise is another beast entirely. The factory's a symphony of clangs, hisses and whirs, loud enough to drown out thought. You've learned to read lips just to catch Ivan's jokes, like the one he's mouthing now about the press looking like the foreman's mother-in-law. You chuckle, but it's a fleeting escape. The noise presses on your skull, and you wonder how anyone stays sane. Some workers stuff cotton in their ears, a trick you're tempted to try, but you need to hear the machine's warnings a change in pitch could mean a jam, or worse. You feed another sheet, the press slamming down with a force that vibrates up your arms. Your muscles ache, but you keep going. The quota's looming, and you're behind, thanks to that jam. You think of your kid, waiting for that bread in your pocket, and it pushes you forward. The machine doesn't care about your family, though, and neither does the party. You're just a pair of hands, and the machine's just a tool until it breaks, or you do. A spark flies from a nearby welder, stinging your arm. You flinch, nearly dropping your wrench. Ivan laughs, calling you a delicate flower, and you toss back that his welding looks like a toddler's scribble. It's a small rebellion, these jokes, a way to steal back a piece of yourself from the machines and the quotas. You tap your wrench twice, feed another sheet, and keep moving, the factory's heartbeat pulling you along whether you like it or not. You're still at your station, the factory's roar, a constant companion, like a storm that never breaks. The afternoon's dragging on, and your arms feel like lead from wrestling the press. Every bolt you tighten is a small victory, but the pile of parts never seems to shrink. You're hyper-aware of a shadow moving closer, the foreman, his boots clicking on the concrete with a rhythm that makes your stomach tighten. He's always watching, his eyes sharp under his cap, enforcing the Soviet discipline that keeps this place running. You're under his gaze now, and one slip could mean trouble. The foreman, a stocky man named Grigory, stops a few feet away, clipboard in hand. His mustache twitches as he scans your work, jotting something down. You keep your head down, focusing on the bolt in your hand, but you feel the weight of his stare. Soviet factories in the 1952nd were notorious for their strict oversight. Mainstream history notes how foremen were the party's enforcers on the floor, ensuring quotas were met and dissent was crushed. Grigory's one of those, a loyalist who'd sell out his own mother for a pat on the back from Moscow. You tighten the bolt, praying it's perfect. He moves closer, his breath sour with tobacco. "Faster, comrade," he barks, tapping his clipboard. You nod, biting back a retort. You'd love to tell him to try bolting 200 parts an hour himself, but you're not stupid. Instead, you speed up, your fingers fumbling slightly. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. Some workers would slip tiny pebbles into their boots to stay alert, the discomfort keeping them sharp under the foreman's eye. You glance at Ivan, wondering if he's got stones in his shoes. He's working silently, but you catch a flicker of a smirk. He knows Grigory's watching too. Historians still argue whether foremen like Grigory were true believers in the Soviet system or just opportunists playing the game. You don't care about his motives, you just want him to move on. He lingers though, scribbling another note. You wonder if it's about you or the guy next to you, who's been coughing all day. A bad report could mean a cut in rations, or worse, a conversation with the party. You've heard whispers of workers disappearing after too many marks on the foreman's clipboard. You tap your wrench twice, your little ritual, and keep going, hoping to stay invisible. Grigory's not just watching your hands, he's watching your face, your posture, your everything. The party's trained him to spot slacking, but also disloyalty. A wrong word, a roll of the eyes, and you're flagged as a troublemaker. You think of Maria, working silently across the line. She's been too quiet since that oil spill incident, and you wonder if Grigory's got her in his sights. You'd bet he's the one who encouraged Pyotr's sabotage, pitting workers against each other to keep control. Divide and conquer, classic Soviet playbook. You fumble a bolt, and it clinks to the floor. Grigory's head snaps toward you, and your heart skips. "Careless," he mutters, making a note. You mumble an apology, bending to pick it up, your face burning. You joke to yourself that if clumsiness were a crime, you'd be in Siberia by now. Ivan shoots you a sympathetic glance, but he's smart enough to keep working. You get back to it, your hands moving faster, though the ache in your wrists is screaming. The foreman's presence is like a weight on your chest, making every move feel like a test. He finally moves on, his boots clicking toward Lena's station. You exhale, but the relief's short-lived. The conveyor belt's still churning, and the quotas still looming. You think of your kid, waiting for that bread in your pocket, and it steadies you. Grigory can watch all he wants, you'll keep going. You notice a smudge on the bolt you're holding, and you wipe it clean not because you care about the tractor, but because you can't afford another mark against you. The loudspeaker crackles, spitting out another anthem, but it's just noise now. You glance at Ivan, who's mimicking Grigory's mustache twitch behind his back. You stifle a laugh, nearly dropping your wrench again. It's a risky move, but it's worth it for the fleeting grin. You tap your wrench twice, tighten another bolt, and brace yourself for the next time Grigory's shadow falls over you. He's always watching, and you're always surviving. You're still hunched over your workbench, the factory's din, a relentless pulse in your ears, like a heartbeat that won't quit. The afternoon's wearing you down, your hands cramping from the wrench's grip, your back stiff from hours of leaning into the press. The foreman's shadow has moved on, thank goodness, but you're not free yet. You're craving a moment to breathe, to steal a sliver of time away from the quotas and the noise. That's where the secret breaks come, in those hidden, risky pauses where you catch your breath, and maybe, just maybe, let your thoughts wander. But in this Soviet factory, even a moment's rest is a game of cat and mouse. You glance around, checking for Grigory or his spies. The coast seems clear, so you slip behind a stack of crates near the back of the shop, where a broken pipe leaks a steady drip. It's not much, but it's your spot, a place to lean against the wall and pretend you're human for 5 minutes. Soviet factories were known for their brutal schedules, with shifts often stretching 12 hours or more, a mainstream fact that left workers like you desperate for these stolen moments. You pull out a cigarette, a cheap one you traded a bread crust for, and light it with a match you keep tucked in your glove. The smoke curls up, sharp and bitter, but it's a small rebellion against the grind. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would hide tiny notes in the cracks of the factory walls, scribbling complaints or dreams they'd never say aloud. You spot a faded scrap of paper wedged near the pipe, too smudged to read. But it makes you wonder who left it. A love note? A curse against the foreman? You smirk, imagining it's a recipe for better kasha. You don't dare add your own, too risky, but the thought's tempting. Historians still argue whether these hidden notes were acts of defiance or just a way to cope, a silent scream against a system that demanded everything. You take a drag. The cigarette's glow, a faint comfort in the dim light. You're not supposed to be here, breaks are scheduled, and unsanctioned ones can earn you a reprimand. But everyone does it, sneaking off to corners like this when the foreman's distracted. You think of Ivan, who's got his own spot behind a rusted machine. Last week, he showed you a trick. Wedge a stick in the press to make it look like it's running while you slip away. You haven't tried it yet too much, like tempting fate, but you're not above it. Your thoughts drift to home, to your kid's laugh, to the way your wife hums when she's mending clothes. It's dangerous to let your mind wander too far. It makes the factory feel even bleaker when you snap back. You tap your wrench twice, a habit that follows you even here, and take another drag. The smoke stings your lungs, but it's better than the factory's air, thick with dust and oil. You hear a clatter nearby. Someone's dropped a tool and you freeze, stubbing out the cigarette against the wall. Your heart's racing, but it's just Lena, passing by with a quick nod. She's heading for her own secret spot, probably. You're not just hiding from work, you're hiding your thoughts. The party's always watching, not just for slacking, but for signs you're not loyal enough. A stray word about the quotas, a joke about the propaganda, and you're in trouble. You think of Maria, her silence since the oil spill incident. Did she take a break like this to plan something, or is she just surviving like you? You hope she's careful. Grigori's got a nose for troublemakers. You joke to yourself that this corners the real socialist utopia. No quotas, no foreman, just you and a cigarette butt. But the moment's fleeting, the whistle will blow soon, calling you back to the line. You crush the cigarette under your boot, hiding the evidence, and slip back to your station. Ivan's there, giving you a knowing look. "Good nap?" he whispers. You grin, muttering, "Better than your welding." He chuckles, but you both get back to work, the conveyor belt pulling you back into its rhythm. Your secret breaks over, but it's enough to keep you going for now. You're back at your workbench, the factory's grind wrapping around you like a heavy coat. The air's thick with the usual mix of oil and dust, and your hands move automatically, bolting parts as the conveyor belt hums. The secret break behind the crates gave you a moment to breathe, but now you're back in the thick of it, and the pressure's mounting. The 5-year plan, that grand Soviet blueprint, looms over everything, its quotas like a noose tightening with every passing hour. You're not just fighting the machine or the foreman now, you're up against the state's relentless demand for more, always more, no matter the cost to your body or mind. You tighten a bolt, your wrists aching from the repetitive motion. The 5-year plans, rolled out since the 1922nd, were the backbone of Soviet industrialization, a mainstream fact that turned factories like yours into battlegrounds of production. By the 1952nd, they'd pushed the USSR to churn out millions of tons of steel, tractors, and who knows what else. But for you, it's not about glory, it's about hitting that daily target of 200 bolts, now creeping toward 210. The supervisors posted new numbers this morning, and you can feel the weight of it. Miss the mark. And it's not just your rations at stake, it's your whole life. You notice a quirky detail. Some workers pin tiny Lenin badges to their overalls, not out of devotion, but because they think it'll make the foreman go easier on them. You spot one on Sergei's chest, glinting under the factory lights. You smirk, wondering if it's worth a try though, knowing Grigori. He'd probably demand 2 badges. You stick to your wrench-tapping ritual instead, a quieter way to keep your focus. Historians still argue whether these displays of loyalty were genuine or just survival tactics, a way to game a system that demanded absolute allegiance. The conveyor belt jerks, spitting out another part. You grab it, but your mind's on the quota. The new target means working faster, skipping breaks, maybe even fudging the logbook. You've seen others do it. Maria's notorious for her perfect counts, though you wonder if she's bending the truth. You're tempted, but the risk is high. A wrong move could land you in front of a party official, explaining why your numbers don't add up. You think of your kid, waiting for that bread in your pocket, and push the thought away. You'll hit the quota, somehow. Ivan's muttering next to you, his voice low. They want more tractors, but the steel's garbage, he says, nodding at a warped part. You nod, keeping your eyes on your work. He's right, the materials are shoddy, but complaining won't fix it. You joke to yourself that the 5-year plan must include a quota for headaches, because you're well over target on that one. The machine groans, and you feed it another sheet, the press slamming down with a shudder that rattles your bones. You're tired, but there's no room for slowing down. The foreman's not hovering now, but his presence lingers in the posters, the loudspeakers, the clipboards stacked in the office. You spot one of those posters now proclaiming, "Exceed the plan," with a worker holding a hammer aloft. It's almost funny nobody here looks that heroic, least of all you, with your greasy overalls and aching back. You glance at Lena, her lathe spinning steadily. She's got that red thread in her glove, and you wonder if it's helping her hit her quota. Maybe you'll weave one in tomorrow, just to see. The pressure's not just from the numbers, It's the fear of falling behind. You've heard stories of workers sent to re-education for missing targets too often. Nobody knows exactly what that means, but the rumors are enough to keep you moving. You think of Maria, her silence a shield, and wonder if she's feeling the same squeeze. You tighten another bolt, your hands a blur, but the pile of parts seems endless. Ivan leans over, whispering, "Bet the planners in Moscow never touched a wrench." You grin, but it's a grim one. He's not wrong. You fumble a part, nearly dropping it, and your heart skips. You recover quickly, but the close call leaves you shaky. You joke to yourself that if you miss the quota, you'll blame the machine, call it a capitalist saboteur. Ivan would laugh at that one. You tap your wrench twice, a small anchor in the chaos, and keep going, the 5-year plan's shadow pushing you forward whether you like it or not. You're still at your workbench. The factories clang and grind a relentless backdrop, like a song stuck on repeat. Your hands are raw from the wrench. Each bolt you tighten feeling like a personal grudge against the conveyor belt. The 5-year plan's quotas are breathing down your neck, but now there's a darker undercurrent rippling through the shop floor, whispers of sabotage, defiance, or just plain survival. You've heard rumors before, but today they're louder, carried in hushed tones between workers like Ivan and Lena. In this Soviet factory, where loyalty is demanded and suspicion is everywhere, even the hint of rebellion could cost you everything. You feed another sheet into the press, its groan vibrating up your arms. The Soviet system in the 1952nd was paranoid about sabotage. Mainstream history records thousands accused of wrecking production, often on flimsy evidence, to justify purges. Here, it's not just about missing quotas. It's about what happens if someone thinks you're deliberately slowing things down. You glance at Ivan, who's working faster than usual, his jaw tight. He catches your eye and mutters, "Heard Pyotr's been talking too much." You nod, keeping your face blank. Pyotr, the guy who might have sabotaged Maria's workbench, has been reckless lately, griping about the quotas in earshot of the wrong people. A quirky tidbit floats around. Some workers would accidentally misalign a machine's gears, just enough to cause a delay without getting caught. You've never tried it too risky, but you've seen the aftermath, a machine down for hours while the foreman fumes. You wonder if Pyotr's that bold, or if he's just careless. You tighten a bolt, your hands steady but your mind racing. Historians still argue whether these acts were sabotage or simple mistakes born of exhaustion, a debate that means nothing when you're the one under scrutiny. The air feels heavier now, charged with unspoken tension. You notice Maria across the line, her movements sharp, but her eyes darting, like she's waiting for something. You hope she's not planning to settle scores with Pyotr. Retaliation's a quick way to the labor camps. You think of your own secret break behind the crates, how even that small act felt like defiance. But real sabotage? That's a line you're not ready to cross. You tap your wrench twice, your ritual grounding you, and keep working, though the whispers are hard to ignore. Ivan leans closer, his voice barely audible over the machine's hum. They say someone swapped parts in the last batch, wrong sizes. Your stomach twists. Wrong parts could halt production, and the foreman's already sniffing for culprits. You remember Grigory's clipboard, his sharp eyes. If he pins this on you, it's over ration cuts, or worse. You joke to yourself that if you're going to be accused, you'd at least like the satisfaction of doing it. But you didn't, and you won't. Your kid needs that bread in your pocket too much. The conveyor belt jerks, spitting out a part that looks off too small, maybe. You hesitate, then set it aside, logging it as defective. It's safer to report it than risk being blamed later. Ivan notices, raising an eyebrow. "Careful," he says, half joking. "You'll end up a hero or a traitor." You smirk, but it's forced. The line between survival and sabotage is razor thin, and you're walking it every day. You think of Lena's red thread, wondering if it's protecting her from this mess. Maybe you'll weave one tomorrow, couldn't hurt. The loudspeaker crackles, announcing a surprise inspection later. Great, just what you need, more eyes watching. You glance at Sergei, his Lenin badge glinting like a shield. He's working hard, but you've heard he's been asking questions about missing supplies. dangerous move. You tighten another bolt, your hands moving faster now, driven by the fear of being noticed. The factory's a pressure cooker, and the whispers of sabotage are turning up the heat. You joke to yourself that if the party wants perfection, they should try working this press themselves. You catch Maria's eye, and for a moment, you think she's trying to tell you something, but she looks away, back to her work. You don't know if she's angry, scared, or just tired, but you know better than to ask. The factory's rules are clear. Keep your head down, keep your hands moving, and keep your mouth shut. You tap your wrench twice, feed another sheet into the press, and pray the whispers don't land on you. You're still bolted to your station, the factory's endless clatter hammering your senses like a storm that won't let up. The whispers of sabotage from earlier linger, making every glance from a coworker feel loaded. Your hands are numb from the wrench, your eyes gritty from dust, and the afternoon's bled into evening. The shift's stretching into overtime now, and exhaustion's creeping in, blurring the edges of your focus. You're trudging through the evening grind. Each bolt a battle against the weight of your own body and the Soviet system's relentless demands. The factory's lights flicker, casting long shadows across the floor. Overtime's common in the 1,952nd Soviet Union mainstream history notes how workers were often pushed past regular hours to meet 5-year plan targets, especially in heavy industry. You're supposed to be off by now, but Grigori announced an extra 2 hours to catch up on the quota. Your stomach growls, the kasha from lunch a distant memory, and the bread in your pockets reserved for your kid. You tighten a bolt, your fingers slipping, and you curse under your breath. The press groans, as tired as you are. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would hum old folk tunes to stay awake during overtime, soft enough to avoid the foreman's wrath. You catch Ivan doing it now, a faint melody under the machine's roar. It's oddly soothing, and you almost join in, but you stick to tapping your wrench twice, instead your own little anchor. Historians still argue whether these quiet acts of defiance, like humming or hiding notes, were rebellion or just survival, a way to reclaim a scrap of humanity in a system that grinds you down. Your vision blurs as you feed another sheet into the press, the metal cold against your calloused hands. The conveyor belt's pace feels faster now, or maybe it's just your fatigue. You glance at Lena, her lathe still spinning, her red thread barely visible in the dim light. She's swaying slightly, exhaustion hitting her too. You want to tell her to hang in there, but words are risky. Grigori's circling again, his clipboard a constant threat. You think of Maria, still working silently across the line. Has she heard the sabotage rumors? Is she keeping her head down, or planning something? You hope she's smarter than that. The machine jams again, a screech that snaps you alert. You grab the crowbar, wedging it into the press's guts, your arms shaking from the effort. Sweat drips into your eyes, stinging, but you don't stop. A jam now means falling further behind, and you can't afford Grigori's attention. You joke to yourself that the machine's staging its own rebellion, probably sick of the 5-year plan too. Ivan notices your struggle and tosses you a rag to wipe your hands. Don't let it win, he whispers, and you manage a tired grin. Small gestures like that keep you going. The overtime's not just physical, it's mental. Your mind's foggy, slipping between the task at hand and thoughts of home. You picture your wife, waiting up, worrying about the late hour. You think of your kid, probably asleep, dreaming of something better than this factory. The bread in your pocket feels heavier, a reminder of why you're still here, still bolting. You fumble apart, nearly dropping it, and your heart races. Grigori's not far, his boots clicking somewhere down the line. You recover, logging the part, but your hands are shaking now. The loudspeaker's quiet for once, but the silence is worse. It leaves you alone with the machines and your thoughts. You notice Sergei, his Lenin badge glinting, working slower than usual. Is he tired, or is he part of those sabotage whispers? You shake your head, pushing the thought away. Paranoia's a trap, and you're already trapped enough. You joke to yourself that if you survive this shift, You'll treat yourself to an extra sip of tea tomorrow, high living, right? You tap your wrench twice, feed another sheet, and keep moving, though every muscle screams for rest. The evening's a blur of metal, noise, and fear. You're not just fighting the quota now, you're fighting yourself, your fading strength, your wandering mind. Ivan's humming grows fainter, and you wonder if he's fading too. You glance at the clock, barely visible in the dim light. 1 more hour. You can make it. You have to. You're still chained to your workbench, the factory's din, a pounding rhythm that's sunk into your bones. The overtime's dragging on, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows across the grimy floor. Your hands tremble as you tighten another bolt, exhaustion making every move feel like wading through mud. The evening's taken a toll, but now you're headed for another Soviet ritual, the union meeting. It's mandatory, of course, and it's about to eat up what little energy you have left. You're trudging toward a dimly lit room off the shop floor, where promises of socialist glory are served up with a side of disappointment, and you're expected to nod along like it all makes sense. You shuffle into the meeting room, a cramped space with peeling paint and rows of rickety chairs. The air smells of stale cigarettes and damp concrete, and the single bulb overhead buzzes like a dying fly. You sit near Ivan, who slouched low, his eyes half closed. The Soviet trade unions, a mainstream fixture since the 1922nd, were supposed to represent workers, but everyone knows they're just another arm of the party, pushing quotas and loyalty over your actual needs. You adjust your cap, trying to look awake as the union rep, a dour man named Victor, takes the podium, clutching a stack of papers. Victor starts droning about socialist achievements and how your factory's vital to the motherland. You've heard it all before. Glory, unity, sacrifice. You glance at Lena, who's picking at her glove's red thread, her face blank. You wonder if she's even listening. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would smuggle bits of food into these meetings, nibbling on breadcrumbs under the table to stay alert. You pat the bread in your pocket, tempted, but you don't dare not, with Victor's eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Historians still argue whether these union meetings were a genuine attempt to rally workers or just a stage for party propaganda. You lean toward the latter, especially when Victor starts reading from a pamphlet about exceeding the 5-year plan. You stifle a yawn, thinking of your kid back home, probably dreaming of a full meal. The promises here: better rations, shorter hours, new housing are as empty as the canteen's tea kettle. You've been hearing them for years, and nothing changes. You joke to yourself that the only thing exceeding is your exhaustion. Victor's voice rises, calling for self-criticism. You tense up. This is the part where workers are supposed to confess their shortcomings, missed quotas, tardiness, anything to show loyalty through humility. You've seen it go wrong. Someone admits too much, and suddenly they're on Grigori's bad side. You keep your mouth shut, staring at the floor. Ivan nudges you, whispering, "Bet Pyotr volunteers first." You smirk, but your stomach twists. Pyotr's been too loud lately, and this could be his chance to redeem himself or dig a deeper hole. Sure enough, Pyotr stands, his voice loud but shaky. "I've been careless with my tools," he says, avoiding Maria's glare from across the room. You wonder if he's covering for that oil spill incident or just fishing for favor. Victor nods, scribbling something, and you feel the room's tension spike. Nobody trusts these confessions. They're a performance, not truth. You think of your own secret break behind the crates, your cigarette stub hidden in the dirt. You're not about to confess that. The meeting drags on, Victor rattling off more promises. New machines next year. Maybe a bonus if quotas are met. You roll your eyes. Catching Ivan's glance, he's thinking the same thing. You joke to yourself that the only bonus you'll see is an extra helping of kasha, and even that's unlikely. The room's getting stuffy, and your eyelids are heavy, but you force yourself to sit up. Falling asleep here would be a mistake. One Grigori's spies would notice. As Victor wraps up, calling for a round of applause for the party, you clap mechanically, your hands stinging. You file out with the others, back to the shop floor for the last leg of overtime. Ivan mutters, "Another hour of my life gone." You nod, thinking of the bread in your pocket, the one thing keeping you grounded. The union's promises echo in your head, empty as ever, but you've got no choice. Back to the bolts, back to the grind. You're still at your workbench, the factory's grind, a relentless hum that's practically fused with your pulse. The overtime shift's winding down, but your body's screaming, your hands are cramped, your back's a knot, and the air's so thick with oil and dust you can taste it. The black market's whispers are still buzzing in your head, tempting you with the promise of a better life, but you push them aside. You're too tired for risky schemes now. Instead, your mind's wandering somewhere else beyond the factory's concrete walls, to dreams of a life not bound by quotas, foremen, or the Soviet system's iron grip. You tighten a bolt, the wrench slipping slightly in your sweaty grip. The Soviet Union in the 1952nd was a place where personal dreams were often crushed under the weight of collective goals. Mainstream history shows how the state prioritized industry over individual aspirations, leaving little room for anything else. But here, in the fading light of the evening shift, you can't help but imagine something different. Maybe a small garden where you could grow potatoes, or a job where your hands don't ache every night. You glance at the bread in your pocket, saved for your kid, and let yourself dream of a day when you don't have to ration every crumb. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would sketch tiny drawings of far-off places, mountains, beaches on scraps of paper, tucking them into their lockers as a private escape. You've never done it, but you've seen Ivan's locker, a faded sketch of a river pinned inside. You wonder where he got the idea, maybe a memory from before the war, or just a fantasy. You smirk, thinking you'd draw a bed, soft and warm, no whistles or quotas in sight. Historians still argue whether these small acts of imagination were a form of resistance, or just a way to survive the factory's soul-crushing routine. You feed another sheet into the press, its groan shaking your bones. The factory's a cage, but your thoughts are slipping through the bars. You picture your kid growing up somewhere with fresh air, not this oil-soaked haze. You think of your wife, laughing without the weight of endless queues. It's dangerous to dream like this. It makes the factory feel smaller, meaner, but you can't stop. You tap your wrench twice. Your ritual, a faint tether to reality, and keep working. The conveyor belt churns, but your mind's elsewhere, chasing a life where you're more than a cog. Ivan's humming that folk tune again, soft and low, and it pulls you back. You glance at him, his face etched with fatigue but his eyes distant, like he's dreaming too. "What's out there for you?" you whisper, half joking. He shrugs, muttering, "A farm maybe, no foreman." You nod, sharing the thought. Lena's nearby, her red thread catching the light. You wonder what she dreams of, maybe something bigger, like Maria, who's still silent across the line. You've heard she wants to study, become an engineer, but the system doesn't make that easy for women like her. The foreman's shadow passes, Grigori's boots clicking faintly. You tense, but he doesn't stop. Good. You're too tired for his clipboard tonight. You think of those sabotage rumors, Pyotr's loud mouth, Sergei's sneaky trades. Dreams are dangerous in a place like this. They make you want more, and wanting more can lead to trouble. You joke to yourself that if dreaming were a quota, you'd be a hero of labor by now. But it's not. And the reality is this: bolts, quotas, and a system that doesn't care if you break. The clock's ticking down, the shift's end in sight. You tighten another bolt, your hands moving on autopilot. Your dreams feel closer now, fueled by exhaustion and the faint hope that tomorrow might be different. You think of Ivan's river sketch, Lena's thread, Maria's silence. Everyone's got something they're holding on to, something the factory can't touch. You pat the bread in your pocket, a small piece of your own fight, and let yourself imagine a day when you're free, not just from the shift, but from all of it. You're deep in the belly of the factory now, the afternoon sun barely creeping through the grimy windows high above. The air's a heavy mix of machine oil and sparks, and your hands are slick with sweat as you grip your wrench. The conveyor belt churns relentlessly. spitting out parts that you bolt together with mechanical precision. It's not just the quotas driving you now, it's the machines themselves, these clunking, groaning beasts that dominate your day. They're the heart of the factory, but they're also a constant threat, ready to jam, break, or worse, take a finger if you're not careful. You're in the thick of the grind, and every move counts. The machine you're working on is a relic, a hulking press from the 1932nd that shakes the floor with every cycle. It's supposed to stamp out tractor parts or maybe tank components. Who knows, but it's as temperamental as a tired mule. You feed a metal sheet into its jaws, pulling the lever with a grunt. The press slams down, the sound rattling your teeth. Soviet factories in the 1952nd were churning out millions of tons of industrial goods, a mainstream fact that made the USSR a global player. But down here, it's just you versus this beast. One wrong move, and you're done for. You notice a quirky habit among the workers. Some tap their machines before starting, like they're coaxing a stubborn horse. Ivan's doing it now, giving his lathe a quick pat while muttering something under his breath. You raise an eyebrow, but you get it superstitions cheaper than a hospital visit. You stick to your own ritual, tapping your wrench twice, but you're not above giving the press a side-eye, half expecting it to bite. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about faith, or just a way to feel in control when the machines and the system held all the power. Your hands move fast, feeding another sheet into the press. It jams mid-cycle, the metal screeching like a wounded animal. You curse under your breath, glancing around to make sure the foreman's not nearby. You grab a crowbar, wedging it into the machine's guts to free the stuck part. Sweat beads on your forehead, and your heart's pounding not just from the effort, but from the risk. A jammed machine means a missed quota, and that's a mark against you. You think of Lena's red thread, wishing you had some luck right now. The crowbar slips, grazing your knuckle, and you wince, checking for blood. Just a scrape, thank goodness. Ivan notices, leaning over. "Careful, comrade," he says, half joking. "That thing eats fingers for lunch." You smirk, but your stomach twists. You've heard stories, workers losing hands, even lives, to these machines. Safety regulations exist, but they're more suggestion than law. You wipe your hand on your overalls, leaving a streak of blood and grease, and get back to work. The press groans back to life, and you exhale, but you're not relaxed. You're never relaxed here. The noise is another beast entirely. The factory's a symphony of clangs, hisses and whirs, loud enough to drown out thought. You've learned to read lips just to catch Ivan's jokes, like the one he's mouthing now about the press looking like the foreman's mother-in-law. You chuckle, but it's a fleeting escape. The noise presses on your skull, and you wonder how anyone stays sane. Some workers stuff cotton in their ears, a trick you're tempted to try, but you need to hear the machine's warnings a change in pitch could mean a jam, or worse. You feed another sheet, the press slamming down with a force that vibrates up your arms. Your muscles ache, but you keep going. The quota's looming, and you're behind, thanks to that jam. You think of your kid, waiting for that bread in your pocket, and it pushes you forward. The machine doesn't care about your family, though, and neither does the party. You're just a pair of hands, and the machine's just a tool until it breaks, or you do. A spark flies from a nearby welder, stinging your arm. You flinch, nearly dropping your wrench. Ivan laughs, calling you a delicate flower, and you toss back that his welding looks like a toddler's scribble. It's a small rebellion, these jokes, a way to steal back a piece of yourself from the machines and the quotas. You tap your wrench twice, feed another sheet, and keep moving, the factory's heartbeat pulling you along whether you like it or not. Section 15. You're at the end of the line now, the factory's roar softening as the final whistle looms. Your hands are raw, your body heavy, each bolt you've tightened today a small scar on your strength. The flickering lights cast long shadows across the grimy floor, and the air's still thick with oil and dust, but there's a shift in the atmosphere, a faint release as the shift winds down. You're trudging toward the exit. The weight of the day still on your shoulders, but there's a flicker of relief too. You've survived another grind, another day in this Soviet machine, And now it's time to leave the factory behind, if only for a few hours, to reflect on what keeps you going: survival, hope, and that bread in your pocket. You tighten one last bolt, your fingers trembling from the overtime. The Soviet Union's factories in the 1952nd were relentless, a mainstream fact that saw millions like you pour their lives into quotas for the motherland's glory. But as you log your final part, you're not thinking about tractors or tanks, you're thinking about home. The conveyor belt slows, and you wipe your hands on your overalls, the grease, a permanent tattoo by now. You glance at Ivan, who's packing up his tools, his folk tunes silenced by exhaustion. He gives you a tired nod, a silent, "We made it." Here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers would leave tiny marks on the factory gate as they left, a scratch or a smudge to say, "I was here." You notice one as you head toward the exit, a faint line etched into the metal, barely visible. You don't add your own, but you get it. It's a way to exist beyond the quotas. Historians still argue whether these marks were defiance or just a need to be remembered, a human trace in a system that reduces you to numbers. You tap your wrench twice, tucking it into your belt, and join the slow stream of workers shuffling out. The gate looms ahead, the red star above it glowing faintly in the dusk. Your breath fogs in the cold air, and your boots crunch on the gravel, a sound that feels like freedom, however fleeting. You pat the bread in your pocket, saved for your kid, and it grounds you. The factory's behind you now, but its weight lingers: the quotas, Grigori's clipboard, the whispers of sabotage, the black market's pull. You think of Maria, her silence a mystery, and Lena's red thread, maybe her shield against it all. You wonder what Ivan dreams of, that river sketch in his locker. For you, it's simpler. A warm meal, your wife's smile, your kids' laugh. You pass the guard, flashing your work pass. He barely looks at you, and you're grateful for it. The world outside feels different, quieter, softer, though the cold bites your face. You pull your coat tighter, the bread a small warmth against your side. You joke to yourself that surviving this shift deserves a medal, but you'd settle for a hot bath. The factory's hum fades behind you, and you let yourself breathe, really breathe. For the first time in hours, you're not just a worker now, you're you, with dreams the party can't touch. As you walk home through the snowy streets, the world grows quieter, the factories roar a distant memory. Your steps slow, each one sinking into the soft crunch of snow, the cold air sharp but cleansing. The stars are out, faint pinpricks above the grey buildings, and you let your thoughts drift, gentle and unhurried. You've carried the day's weight bolts, quotas, Grigori's glare, but now it's slipping away, like dust settling after a long shift. You picture your family, waiting in that cramped flat, the warmth of their voices wrapping around you like a blanket. The bread in your pocket feels lighter now, a promise kept. You're safe, you're whole, and tomorrow's another day. But for now, you're just walking, breathing, dreaming under the vast, quiet sky. Let the factory fade. Let the worries dissolve. Sleep's waiting, soft and warm, ready to carry you away.